Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for joining us in this webinar. What I hope to do with you today is share the lessons we're learning from the nation's most rapidly improving schools, because what has happened is they've become very future-focused. And why I think it's important to become future-focused is, as I crisscross this country, I'm beginning to believe that we are entering and will accelerate over the next 12 months into what I call the post-standards and assessment era. That era began with No Child Left Behind, and then the whole standards movement. And I want you to think about those for a while. No Child Left Behind, the standards movement, the new test, the new teacher evaluation programs. Obviously, that came out of pressure from Washington and from state houses across the country. The question is, why did the political leaders in this country begin to put those requirements on American schools? And it's because they were getting pressure. And I'd like to have all of you think for a moment, where did that pressure come from? Did the pressure come from us educators saying, oh, you need to make us do more in different things? I don't think so. That pressure came from the business community that was increasingly saying, well, we have a problem. And our problem is not that American schools are failing. They're getting better. It's like the bottom line on the chart I'm showing you. We kept adding more tests and more requirements and had more complex group of kids, but we are graduating more of them. So why did the business community put pressure on the elected officials to do something different in our schools? And the reason is because the world outside of school was that top line. Pushed by technology, pushed by globalization. The workplace was changing 4 to 5 times faster than the education system. And so we had this interesting paradox. The bottom line on this chart, our kids were the best educated ever. The top line, and the gap between those lines, that gap had never been larger. The kids were the best educated ever, but the least prepared for the world in which they were going to enter. And therefore, they said, we got to raise standards. And they went to all the establishment in education and began to say, what do we do? If you ask math teachers, what do we need to do? Well, we need more math. Language arts teachers, what do we need? More language arts. And what happened was we returned to the past. If you really think about the standards and the assessments, we doubled down on what we used to do. It was an eye to the past. While that was happening, technology was changing faster and faster and faster. And our schools were simply not able to keep up with that level of change. However, there were a few across the country that did. I had the privilege of chairing a national study between my organization, the International Center for Leadership in Education, and the Council of Chief State School Officers. We had come together at the encouragement of some governors and business leaders now 10 years ago as part of that whole movement. And what they asked us to do is go across America and find the nation's most rapidly improving schools. And I want to underscore something. I didn't say highest performing. I said most rapidly improving. And they gave us, with great support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, resources to get under the covers of these schools and see what they were doing differently. And what we found is they had a rigorous learning for all student mentality. Rigorous learning, all students. To do that, what they recognized is the kids are totally different. They had different interests, learning styles, aptitudes. And so you had an instructional effectiveness that was defined by the learner, not by the teacher. You had to really understand the kids. It changed in those schools how teaching was occurring. But to change how teaching was occurring, you had to change your instructional leadership. And ultimately, it had to be led by organizational leadership change. And what I'm going to try to do in this webinar is take you through, what did you do at the organizational leadership level in these schools? What did you do at the instructional leadership level? And what are they doing differently at the teaching level? let's begin with organizational leadership. They understood clearly that culture trumps strategy. Until you have a culture that says we need to do something different, you'll never ever change your schools. And most people support change as long as it doesn't impact them. And when you begin to say, what do we need to do to prepare kids for their future, you have to look at technology. When we look at technology, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the fourth industrial revolution as we speak. The first industrial revolution occurred when we went from animal power to steam power. The second industrial revolution is when we went from steam power to electrical and mechanical power. And when we did that, the American factory became the preeminent economic engine of the world. We had the best factories, and the economic base of America improved dramatically. But I want you to think about those factories. In those old factories, everybody was a specialist. You went to a workstation and you did one task, and you did it over and over and over. And we timed the assembly line back then, so you only had a certain amount of time to do your task. The product came down, stayed in front of you for a short period of time, you did your task, the product moved on. The second industrial revolution was defined by specialization and time. And please listen carefully to my next statement. The American public education system adopted those basic principles. Everything is governed by time, and everybody is a specialist. The next time, principals, you're in front of your faculty, ask a third, fourth, or fifth grade teacher to stand up next to you. I do it in my presentations all the time. And ask the teacher how many kids she has, and let's say she has 20 or 25. And ask her or him, at the beginning of the year, let's say it's a fourth grade teacher, were some of those fourth grade kids not really ready for fourth grade? And you know the teacher's going to say yes. Ask them if there was one or two kids in the class that with a little extra effort probably already could do fifth grade work. And the teacher will say yes. And ask them if those kids have different interests and learning styles and aptitudes. And the teacher will say yes. And then ask them, well, will some of those kids during this school year have a real tragedy in their mind, or their cat or dog will die, a cat or dog that they've known since they were infants. They'll have a true tragedy. Their parents, one or two of those kids might have their parents split up. Some of those kids are going to be out of school for a period of time this year because they're sick. But your teachers are so sensational that despite all these differences, they're going to get all those kids to the exact same place academically on one given day, at one given hour, on one given test. That is lunacy, folks. And all of us in education know it. But it was the second industrial revolution model. Everybody's the specialist, and everything's governed by time, because we adopted a proficiency model, not a growth model. The nation's most rapidly improving schools understood that a proficiency model will not get all kids to be all they're capable of being. A proficiency model measured by just one single indicator, a state test, will drive you to try to educate to the middle one-third of the students. While all that was going on in our schools, our kids, today's students in our schools, have spent their entire life in the third industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution is the information age. For them, it's the iPhone age. Think about the kids. Are they have as their technology nearly an extension of their body today? Are they addicted to the gaming? And with these iPhones or any devices like that, they can access information anywhere. They can share information, so we don't let them use them on a test because we would call that cheating. In other words, using resources, working with others, is cheating. Only in schools, folks. only in schools because we're still trying to force 21st century technology that they'll have to use every day of their life once they leave school and use every day of their life now when they're not in school. We're trying to force 21st century technology to conform to our 20th century schools. The nation's most rapidly improving schools said, wait a minute, we need to transform the 20th century schools into the realities of a technological information-based society that their kids have spent their entire life on and will live in for the rest of their lives. When we look at that third industrial revolution, the information technology, it's kind of gone through three waves. The first wave was the information technology. And with information technology, best example I can give you, Web 1.0, the informational web is Google. You couldn't Google anything in the 90s because it didn't exist yet. It was patented in 1998, about 2002 before it took off and was widely used. But isn't it extraordinary how quickly Google can get your information? But I want you to think about Google. Nothing happens until you ask it a question. Web 2.0 was called the relational web. The relational web, best example I can give you of that is Facebook. Once you're on Facebook, stuff just keeps coming at you. And today's kids, they're not on Facebook. They're on, as you know, other similar technologies. But they're not on Facebook because we are. They're on Snapchat, Instagram. But that technology is very interactive. Web 3.0, it's called the anticipatory 3.0 web. It has very deep data mining. It has artificial intelligence. It has what we call deep learning, which I'm going to describe to you in a few minutes, how profoundly that's going to change society and hopefully our schools. But with anticipatory 3.0 web, what happens is, and I'll go back to Google as an example, if you Google something today, you get an ad. But each of you on this webinar get different ads. And you get different ads because it's based upon your history. It's based upon what you have Googled. It's based upon whatever website you land on, what you then click down to. It's based upon how long you stay on each click. It's based upon who you email and what they have done online. Not only websites they've been on, what they have Googled, what they have bought online. And an algorithm constantly is updated instantaneously on each one of us. That's Google. By the way, Gmail does the exact same thing. If you go to a supermarket or a drugstore today and buy something, on the back of your receipt is a coupon. But nobody gets to send coupons. And a lot of people think, oh, that's because of what I just bought. No, that's a small part of that algorithm. When you signed up for the card for the supermarket or drugstore, you know what they have on you? They get everything Google's got. Everything Gmail's got. And it's constantly updated. Now, if Google's got the information on you in Gmail, in our supermarkets and our drugstores, your credit card company, your bank, the question is who else has got it? And the answer is anybody who wants it. Anybody who wants it. New apps are coming out that enable you to access that information about anyone you want to access it about. And let me show the consequence of that, which just happened at Harvard. What happened at Harvard is they accepted the freshman class this year. Then they got, in effect, the app. They then found that some of the kids had done, that they had admitted, had done some things online and been frequency websites they didn't think was a good idea for them, not for a Harvard student. So despite the fact that they had paid their first semester tuition, were registered in Durham, they yanked their acceptance. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not just Harvard. It's virtually every business out there. Every school district is going to have to do it. Do the kids in your school understand that they are leaving a digital tattoo on themselves that will now last for the rest of their lifetime. So I ask you a simple question. Is this part of 21st century literacy? And the answer is in most schools, no, because it's not on the test. See, even the basic concept of literacy is being changed by this technology. But you know what else is being changed? The workplace. If we go back to 2007, these are the 5 largest companies in the world in rank order by sales. Compare them to those that are now the 5 largest this year. What I'm going to show you in a minute is none of these 5, the 2017 5, will be in the top 5, I believe, within 5 years. They're all about to be replaced because of the 4th industrial revolution. The 4th industrial revolution is nanotech and biotech. Each of these revolutions has come faster and faster and faster. What I'm now going to try to show you is that our schools still organize around time and specialization, 2nd industrial revolution. In the testing and standards movement, we actually doubled down on that 2nd industrial revolution. Despite the fact that the kids were born and would live their life in at least the 3rd industrial revolution. But the reality of it is that 3rd industrial revolution is now about to be replaced by the 4th industrial revolution, in which our kids will actually have to function in. And that 4th industrial revolution is built on the 3rd, but it's also built on nanotech. They are now building microprocessors that are 1/100th the width of a human hair. 1/100th the width of human hair. And one of those microprocessors have more computing power than mainframe computers of the 1980s had. They're 10 times stronger than steel. And most importantly, you'll see in a minute, they are the texture of Jell-O. And how they're going to play out? Well, they're being played out in the building trades. They're being played out in the building trades because now masons, projected 80% decline in masons over the next 5 to 8 years because the nanotechnologies will lay up the brick faster, 10 times faster than a human being, less materials. Painting of a house, inside of a house, 3,000 square foot house, paint the inside, walls and trim, 90 minutes with nanotechnology with sensors. Framing of a house, same thing. Framing of the house, putting all the studs up, done by technology, 10 times faster than a human being, requires less materials, more uniform. What's going to happen to the building trades? FedEx, UPS, now moving to using drones. What's that mean? Projected 5-fold increase in deliveries by UPS and FedEx over the next decade and a 40% decline in employees. Look at the supermarkets. Think about how many people lost their job because of an ATM or a kiosk. Well, now what supermarkets are doing and leading way is the purchase of Whole Foods by Amazon and their new technologies. And when I present to an audience, I show videos of every example I'm now giving you. But the videos don't come through well on a webinar, so I didn't use the videos here. But the new Amazon technology in the supermarkets, you walk in, you get a bag on your way in, and you just throw whatever you want into that bag, and it records everything you're buying. No more checkout counter. No more person at the checkout. Automatically charged to your credit card. You know about the driverless cars? Projected 20 million of them by 2022. Tesla is now the most valuable auto manufacturer in the world, bigger than Ford and GM. Tesla didn't even exist 10 years ago. But in these driverless cars, all cars are beginning to have some of that capacity. You've seen some of the self-parking cars, some of the cars that brake if you get too close to another car. But the bigger issue is Those cars have over 4,000 sensors on them. And those 4,000 sensors just don't help you drive. They monitor everything going on in your car and transmit that information via the cloud anywhere in the world to a technician that can then fix that car. The new Tesla car, you bring it in for three things: change the tire, windshield wipers, and the oil. Nearly everything else is done remotely. What's that going to do to your local auto mechanic? Truck drivers, there are 1.2 million of them in the country right now. They're the fastest ones moving towards the driverless vehicles. Those jobs are gone. That's nanotech. Now let's move to biotech. Because biotech integrated with nanotech is the huge issue. I'm sorry, folks, that was my phone. Biotech integrated with nanotech becomes the big issue. With biotech, the best example I can give you is in the medical field. It's biotech, nanotech, all digitized. I'll give you just one example. I'm sure all of you had a vaccine for polio when you were a child. And that you only needed one vaccine, and it stayed in your body for a lifetime. Nearly eradicated polio. If we go back 50 years in this country, the number one cause of death was pneumonia. Now, few people die of pneumonia. Moving forward, new bio-nanotech chips projected in the medical field. Great debate, whether it will be 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, but it's clearly coming. A bio-nanotech chip, 1/100th the width of human hair, texture of jello, all programmed to do different things. And so the projection is you're going to be able to get a vaccine if you choose to, shot into your circulatory system, and those bio-nanotech chips will just stay in your body forever. And some of them will be programmed to identify if they go past a vein or an artery that is becoming weakened. Transmit that information to your handheld device, i.e. your iPhone or a device like that, onto your doctor's office. I'm sure most of your doctors already have information systems for you, where they're submitting information to you back and forth to them. But I'll go to the doctor's office. The doctor will be able to read it and respond back. And then there's a great debate. And I'll come back through your doctor's portal. Will they be able to have that bio-nanotech chip actually go in and seal off the weakened artery or vein, or will they have to give you an additional shot to seal it off with other bio-nanotech chips? I have family members and some friends who are surgeons, and they say what they were doing earlier in their career is going to look really barbaric because they used to cut people open. They're not going to have to do that. The technology will seal it off. Let me take you further. Another bio-nanotech chips. They'll identify if they pass near any cell that is malforming in your body. Communicate it to your doctor's office, back and seal it off, and zap the cell. What three diseases I just talked about? Heart disease, stroke, cancer. It will not eradicate them. I want to be clear on that. It will not eradicate them. But it is going to fundamentally reduce the incidence of those three terrible diseases, which are the three leading causes of death in this country. So what's my point? My point is, ladies and gentlemen, this technology is going to impact every part of our life. If you can write an algorithm for a task, the job is gone. And once the algorithm is written, the technology keeps rewriting its own algorithms and updating it. It's the deep learning. When you're driving down the road and your GPS suddenly says, oh, rather than being 47 minutes from your destination, you're now 59 because there's a 12-minute delay. How does it know that? It's because of the deep learning within the technology. And it's got all the cars using the GPS pulled together into one single database. Oh, let me ask you, is this math or is this science? Or is this language arts? And the answer is, it's all of them. The real world doesn't function by discipline. We function by discipline in schools because everybody is a specialist and everything is governed by time. The examples I'm giving you are going to impact not simply entry-level jobs. Bureau of Labor Statistics are projecting major declines in these four occupations. Let me give you one example. Accountant. Remember, you can write an algorithm, the job is gone. They're projecting a 92% decline in accountants and auditors in the next 8 years. Lawyers, even doctors, think about the analytical work. When you got your last physical, did your doctor spend more time looking at the computer and peppering you with questions than they did physically examining you? Medicine is becoming an information system. And so what happens? This technology first invaded the entry-level jobs. Again, think about how many people lost their jobs because of an ATM or kiosk. But look, there's more entry-level jobs. How did that happen? If technology eliminated entry-level jobs, how are there more entry-level jobs? And the issue is it's creating more jobs at the top. But that group at the top, they eat out 2 or 3 times a week. They have more help with child care. They have somebody else mow their lawns, shovel their driveways and sidewalks. They are creating a service sector. But those service sector jobs don't pay enough for an individual to be financially independent. And it's leading us to having a missing middle, more at the bottom, more at the top, and an increasingly polarized nation. Now, the good news for educators, the safest job in the middle, or in the Department of Labor, is teacher. You know why? Can't write an algorithm for what a teacher does. So where will the jobs be in 2027? Nobody knows. They just know they'll be bio-nano information tech-based increasingly. We also know that the big companies can't respond quick enough to change. So what we know is the growth is in small companies. And when you're an entrepreneur, you've got to be good at something and willing to do everything. It's the exact opposite of what the specialization of the second industrial revolution required, and the absolute opposite of what we do in schools. There are no custodians. There are no cafeteria workers. There are no bus drivers and buildings and grounds people, paraprofessionals and professionals. No. You do everything. The other major shift is because of this technology, increasingly you can move work to worker anywhere in the world. Give you an example of that. Here's Shenzhen, China, 2007. You look at this picture, you'll see the river and some buildings, the other side of the river, a lot of low-lying buildings. I want you to look at those two buildings as I take you from 2007 to Shenzhen, China from the same angle today. While they went from this to that, we can't change a bus schedule. We can't change a room a teacher teaches in. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 7 billion people in the world. 6 billion own handheld devices. More people hold handheld devices than have running water in their homes, therefore toilets in their home. And you know what these developing nations have? They have a blank piece of paper. And as I'm going to show you in a couple minutes, what we need to do to prepare kids for this changing world is not complicated. What is really complicated for us in America is how do we dismantle what we have in place? How do we transition a second industrial revolution education system to prepare kids for the third and fourth industrial revolution? Before I finish up with some additional information, take you into a little bit more on why we need to change and what to change, I'm be glad to entertain questions. If you have any questions, you can type them in, and I'll be glad at the end of the webinar to try to answer those questions. So begin to think about your questions. So the nation's most rapidly improving schools have spent a lot of time, again, creating the culture. Culture trumps strategy. Why do we need to prepare kids for something different? Because the workplace has changed. And yet we're still very tied up on preparing them for higher ed. So let's see how we're doing in higher ed. This is national data last year. Of those students that went to four-year colleges last year in America, 34.8% dropped out before the end of the first year. In our two-year colleges, 44.5% dropped out before the end of the first year. And yet every high school takes with pride on graduation night to say how many kids are going to college. We never say how many complete. Now, why is that so important to elementary educators? Because what's the purpose of second grade? Get the kids ready for third grade. Third grade, what's your job? Get them ready for fourth. Elementary, get them ready for middle. Middle school, get them ready for high school. High school, get them ready for college, until they almost all drop off the educational ladder. We are presently graduating 36.6% of our kids in 5 years who attend four-year colleges. In our two-year colleges, after 3 years, we're now graduating 29.1%. I suggest to you we have a problem. It's not only that they're not graduating, it's that they may be majoring in the wrong majors. Look at these 5 majors. These are the 5 fastest growing majors in our two-year colleges. Now, on the left-hand side, look how technical they are. Look at the occupations. Now, stare at the center column, which are the starting salaries. These are the starting salaries for the 5 most rapidly increasing two-year college majors. Stare at the middle column as I move you now to the 5 fastest growing four-year college majors. $10,000 to $15,000 a year less. But look at the majors. What are you going to do with those majors? Yet there are some great four-year majors. Look at these. What you major in matters a lot. Every state in the country has adopted 4 words under their standards: college and career ready. Why? Because we're really not doing a great job at either one. But what does college and career ready mean? What it really means is being able to do things you can't Google. A national study on the future of work just released the 10 most critical skills needed for the 21st century workplace. I'm not even going to talk over them. I'm just going to list them one by one. Please read them. The challenge with these 10 is I can't measure them with one of our tests. You can't Google these. So what do? As instructional leaders, in building principles, you are instructional leaders. What do you do beyond creating a culture to support change? Well, you create a framework for your instructional program and a belief system. Please read these 5 and think for a moment, what 2 numbers on this chart will our kids have to function at as adults to become independent? Is it 1 and 2, or is it 4 and 5? And most people would say either it's 3, 4, or 5. That's what you got to do to be independent. And isn't that what every parent is hoping? That ultimately we prepare their kids to be independent. But when we analyze our state tests, where do we find them? At 1 and 2. Now, there's nothing wrong with 1 and 2. You can't get to 3, 4, and 5 if you don't have 1 and 2. So I say 1 and 2 is essential, but it's not adequate. Assume you all know this as Bloom's taxonomy. And this is the rigor and relevance framework. And if you remember anything from this webinar, the next 3 minutes are absolutely the key to the webinar. And if I did a good job in the first 35 minutes, it will make sense. If I didn't explain it well in the first 35 minutes, I will lose you here. But if you put Bloom's taxonomy or academic rigor off the left-hand side of this chart, put application across the bottom, Quad A is low-level knowledge with no application. That's what we test with a state test. And again, there's nothing wrong with A. I can't get to B, C, and D if I don't have A. C is college ready. It's higher than the state test. B is job ready. That's your career and tech ed programs, your voc ed programs, the real-world application of basic knowledge. The problem is B is being automated out of the workplace by the third and fourth industrial revolution, which means career ready really requires D. Career ready are these broader sets of skills. Keep that in mind. And again, if you have any questions, please submit them. So I want you to watch this chart carefully. A and C. A and C is what we had to teach in the pre-internet age. We had to teach it. We had to teach it because you either had to have knowledge or you had to know where to go get it. I mean, how many of you had an encyclopedia in your house when you were a kid, or a Webster's dictionary? You either had to have information or you had to know where to go get it. In the internet age, what we got to teach is B and D because I can't Google it. And increasingly, it's D. Our problem is we are regulated, certified, tenured, and contracted by A and C, which was the rules of the second industrial revolution. We are regulated, certified, tenured, and contracted for a century that's passed us by. I challenge you, principals, what's your job? Is your job to maintain the rules, or is your job to change the system? High-performing schools say we got to be future-focused. We got to go to D. We got to find a way to do that. With that, I'm going to see if we yet have any questions, and if we don't, I'll go on to some additional PowerPoints. But let's see if we have any. We have any questions from anyone yet?
Not yet, but I'll read them towards the end.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to keep going and remind people if they have any to enter them, okay? So let me kind of conclude my message, and then we'll, if you have questions, we'll take them. So how do you do it? What do you do at the teaching level? 7 interrelated fundamental shifts. 1, I've hit it over and over. You got to move from A and C to B and D. Number 2, we got to change what we do in reading, writing, and mathematics. See, reading is still critical, absolutely critical. But what do you have to read in a technological information-based society? It's not novels, folks. What you got to read are technical materials. Now, that doesn't mean reading of novels isn't important and isn't enjoyable. But do you read a manual fundamentally differently than you read a newspaper, a magazine, a novel? How many of you still have at least one clock in your house off by 1 hour, and you can't wait till the end of this month because then it will be the right time again? Got a manual? Can't you read? What do you think you had to read in the workplace, in the military? even in our personal lives. Technical reading and writing is really, really critical. Fortunately, most schools still use English language arts as the primary platform to teach reading, which is more fiction-based than nonfiction-based in a world that requires increasingly more nonfiction. Writing, high-performing schools, they're having kids write every day in every discipline. Mathematics. Remember earlier I said purpose of third grade, get kids ready for fourth ready for fifth. Elementary, get them ready for middle school, high school, college. So let's just look at a high school math curriculum for a minute, even though you're elementary people. This is the typical math curriculum. When's the last time any of you used that? With the exception of maybe a little algebra and geometry, when's the last time you used pre-calc or calculus? You know what percentage of the workforce uses this? 5%. What does the workforce use? They use the mastery of middle school math at the B&D level. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got to stop passing kids on before they master the most basic of the math skills. And just saying they passed the state test doesn't mean they have mastered, especially at the B&D level. Doesn't mean, because they can do the test, doesn't mean they can use that math to solve real-world predictable problems. Data analytics, finding more and more common in our schools. See, the technological information-based society has generated so much information that the reality of it is, once you leave school, you're going to use less and less text. There's too much information to access by text. They're going to tables, graphs, and charts. But they're not tables, graphs, and charts like I learned in school. They're a three-dimensional tables, graphs, and charts. Again, is that math? Is that language arts? Is that social studies? The real world is integrating all disciplines together. Innovation, creativity, really, really important. That's Pod D. I can't Google it. I'm giving kids a lot of experiences at that. I'm presently chairing a national study to find the nation's most innovative schools and districts. Fascinating what we're finding, how different those schools do it. Technology tools, here's my advice. You're spending too much time on them. The kids know the tools. In fact, they can teach the teachers. We need to teach them the responsible use of the tools, but not how to use them. High-performing schools really have integrated social media and its implication on how to use it as part of their curriculum is 21st century literacy. And then non-cognitive. Respect, responsibility, trustworthiness, so on. Culture, really important. They are the 7 major shifts we see in the elementary as well as the secondary school curriculum in the nation's most innovative, future-focused schools. We see a huge change in how they're then delivering instruction. They've gone to open educational resources. Best example I can give you is teachers pay teachers. The problem with teachers pay teachers is there are great examples there. By the way, they're doing $1.4 million a week. Teachers are paying out of their own pocket. The problem is the random acts of wonderful things. They're not typically tied nicely to scope and sequence. So you need to make sure that in your open educational resources, teachers pay teachers, it's tied to scope and sequence. Second item, every major publisher is going digital, away from text. Kids won't have any problems with that. You know we'll have the problems, the adults. As principals, you have a plan to make sure all your teachers are beginning to use digital. Moving to augmented reality. Augmented reality is putting virtual reality on top of actual reality. And what we find there is when I say the publishers are going text to digital, that what they're beginning to do is integrate augmented reality into their instructional materials. Exciting for kids. Increasingly, the concepts of gamification are creeping into the development of instructional materials all across this country. High-performing schools are using it. The games, I don't necessarily like them, but they're engaging for the kids. They're very personalized to their own interests. Think about the games. They're trying to beat their last score. The games are built on a growth model, which is what we need to move our schools towards, rather than simply the proficiency model. So they're engaging, personalized, built on growth models, and most of the major gaming companies are now beginning to write games around our standards. You got a kid who loves sports? Sports is applied math and science. Slowly, gradually introduce math and science concepts. Just don't tell them it's the school standard. And the kid will learn it to improve their game. And then, as we look at them doing all of those things, what we find is the gaming companies are beginning to marry up with the online companies to deliver online instruction, elementary, middle school, high school kids that are game-based, very exciting, tied to the state standards. I raise a question. You going to bring them in your schools? Or are you going to keep them out? We won't let the kids use the iPhone because they might cheat. In other words, they might figure out how to beat the 20th century education system. Principals, are you trying to manage the 20th century system? Or are you trying to transition your schools to a 21st century learning environment? If you are, they're going to have to use these fundamental shifts in instruction. So that's the DSEI system. We call it DSEI, Daggett System for Effective Instruction, based upon the nation's most rapidly improving schools. So last week in June in Orlando, we're going to bring together these nation's most rapidly improving schools for 4 days. If you'd like to learn more about that, go to our website. It's listed here on this PowerPoint slide. We invite you to try to bring a team from your schools. See what the nation's most rapidly improving schools are. Let the teachers talk to teachers, principals to principals. How are they doing it? And finally, if you have any questions for me, if I can help you in any way, this is my email. I don't want you to hesitate contacting me. And with that, if we have any questions, we'll take our last few minutes for any questions you may have. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, Dr. Daggett, I have a few. First question, what strategies do you suggest for building a culture to support change?
Great question. Number one, they may want to take this very PowerPoint I just gave and take it and let some of their staff see it. I often say we can break the staff into thirds. A third of the staff, every time they hear somebody like me speak, they get excited. This group is in a perpetual state of excitement. I call them the lunatic fringe, half-crazy people. They usually become principals. They're willing to do anything. Then you got another middle third that say maybe, who's going to pay for it, who's going to train us, will it be on the test. And you have another third that say, over my dead body, will you mess up my 2005 lesson plan? Here's my word of advice. Start creating culture with the top third. Invite the middle one-third to listen, and don't force the bottom one-third because you'll just take on battles you don't need. So start this by sharing this PowerPoint. Go to our website. I have white papers that back up a lot of these slides. The other thing is, schedule permitting, I actually come in schools and do actual presentations to staff, and we have other colleagues that do that. Start with the staff. After you've started with the staff, then share the message with parents. The parents get it quicker than the staff. But don't go to parents first because the staff will feel you set them up. Next question.
Great. How can we learn more about the nation's most successful practices?
I think the best way probably is our Model Schools Conference last week in June, where we'll be showcasing all these schools. They'll bring teams from their schools to present what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so you see those presentations. Also, we'll provide case studies of those schools. You might also want to just visit our website, which has been on several of my slides here. Visit the website and go to case studies or go to model schools, and you'll get lots of information.
Great, and I think you answered the last question, but just to reiterate, are you and your colleagues available to meet with school district leadership teams?
We are. If you have an interest, email me at this address, and we'll get back to you. Probably schedule a call, just find out what you're interested in, and see what works on everyone's schedule.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daggett. This will
Thank you.
end the webinar.
Thank you, and good luck to everybody on the call.